Good to have you here and welcome those who are joining us later for the recording. I am here with Michele Lilyanna. Hi, Michele, welcome. I want to introduce you real quick and then you can jump in and say hello to everyone. So Michele, I've known Michele for some time. I'm privileged to be able to call her a friend, as well as a colleague in the world of mindfulness and education. And Michele has been teaching in the Canadian public schools for over 30 years in the classroom as a classroom teacher, as well as an SEL specialist. Michele is also the co-author of Awakening Joy for Kids. I've got my copy here. Fantastic book for parents and for educators, based on a program by James Barris, who also co-wrote the book, called Awakening Joy. So welcome, Michele. So glad to have you. You might have to unmute.
There. Hi. Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see people and some people I know.
So, Michele, I was thinking earlier this morning that I have known you for some time, and I got to the opportunity to stay with you up in Gibsons in BC. I think it was 6 years ago, and a lot's happened since then. Of course, this has been a pretty challenging few years across the globe. There hasn't been a country untouched by this pandemic. And I'm wondering how you've been, how have you personally been navigating this past year as a teacher, but also just as a human being trying to get through this this difficult time there.
Yeah, well, I took an early retirement, and then when the pandemic came, I went back as a social emotional support teacher. The kids needed it, the teachers needed it. We were lucky enough to be able to offer that at our school. So I would be able to help kids that were having a really difficult time in the classrooms. For myself, I'm actually an introvert, even though I really express as an extrovert. So I really developed my own practices at home as a daily practice. And I did the Awakening Joy course. Actually, I co-facilitated with James the parenting part. So I was working with parents and teachers throughout the year, which was just such a touchstone for me. But this year, again, I took a couple of weeks and developed my own practices at home. I dipped into the school, and I may be going back as a social emotional support teacher again this year. We're just finding out, actually, probably this weekend. Teachers are really, really tired. I don't blame them at all. And I've been going in as a teacher on call a little bit. And the thing I find really difficult, the kids, they're so resilient. They just go along. We are all wearing masks, and I find it very difficult for communication, to hear the kids and for them to hear me. And I also think it's very difficult for facial nuances. Like, the kids used to say, Miss Al, when you raise your eyebrow, we know, we sit down. Now they can't even barely see the eyebrow. So they're not getting those facial cues about the world. I think it's much more challenging.
Yeah. I have a son in kindergarten, and that's something that I kind of worry about, just the developmental learning and how just the strangeness of this time with masks and social distancing and all the time that they've spent online, how that's been affecting them. But you're seeing, your experience with the kids so far has been that they're resilient.
They are amazingly resilient. They just adapt. They tend to adapt to everything going on, and they play, and there's joy and laughter and giggling, and they bring me so much joy. That's why I go. And they're tiring. All of it.
It's everything.
Yeah, there's not a teacher who wouldn't say they come home pretty tired at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. Well, it seems like people who dive into the realm of mindfulness and compassion type practices, we always have some kind of story about how we got there. So I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit of your story, how you got started with mindfulness and these
Well, yeah,
practices.
I think for me it was necessity. Like I said, I am an introvert. I become more introverted over the years where I need blocks of quiet time in my day. And I've taught kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. But most of my center has been in elementary. And what I found was I was taking yoga classes actually, and they were on Monday nights, and I would bring the practices into the class the next day. And we would, every day the kids knew we moved all the chairs, we turned off the lights. And this was a while ago. And there were people that were like, oh, what are they doing in there? But now yoga is just like, it's a great way to center. And I'd invite the parents in. Everybody that was around would come in and we'd do yoga every morning. And then we started building into the mindfulness training. And I was doing quite a bit of just practices of settling the body because I needed it as a teacher. I needed those spaces. And then I started getting into the work of some of the people we'll talk about in a minute.
Hmm. That's wonderful. I kind of want to give some context, if you don't mind, because I know
Mhm.
because I've gotten to go to Gibson's and see your school and the community that you live in, that you're not in a metropolitan area. I think a lot of the time, these types of practices, we see them kind of central in these central locations of major cities, like you might think of Vancouver, or here it'd be San Francisco. But you're in a very small town. I almost want to say rural. I don't know if you
Yeah, it is.
identify it as rural, but and so people really know each other. And even though I think mindfulness, of course, has a place in these more urban centers, that's where I've been teaching and have been bringing it into the schools here, that there's something to be said about just these smaller communities, not to shy away from bringing in these practices, bringing in the parents, so this can be a whole community experience is kind of what you just pointed to, that there's
Yeah.
that opportunity. And it's something you've done really well. I've been watching and learning from you how you've been doing that through the years.
Well, I have two little things to share right now. One is Heather, if you could put up, we have a lovely person online. You can't see her maybe, but we have Heather with us who's doing all our back work here. And just delighted she's here. And Heather, would you put that picture up of the mama and the child? And I'll tell you a little bit about this as a small town. So the mama is Ellie, and Ellie was in my grade 3 class and my grade 7 class.
Oh, wow.
And we'll go back to
Who was your
her.
student? The mom was your student.
Yeah, the mom's my student.
Uh-huh.
So Heather will put her back up. So what's so amazing about being in a small town is you can see what really happened with your teaching. Um, Heather, can you get her back up? Or are you trying? I think you're trying probably. There we go. So over the years, you can see, did this have any effect? And this is what I wrote about in our book, is you actually have a test space. So Ellie was in my grade 3 class and then my grade 7 class. And then she moved away and all of those things happened. And then she came back and her little ones came to my school and they were in my class. So this is one of hers that's just before she started school. And Ellie would tell her, Miss L was my teacher, and the practices that I did with Ellie all those years ago had an effect on her. And then her kids got to come through, which is, I think, absolutely amazing. You rarely get that, to be able to see whatever happened to your students. And I was actually walking in the park yesterday, and this tall boy goes by me, and I thought, I know that face. And I said, hi, did you go to, and I told him my school, and he said, yeah, I did. And he's 31 now. And he goes, I liked your teaching, Miss L. It was all like cuddly. It was so sweet. And we have somebody on the call right now. Grace is on the call. And I taught Grace in grade 6. And we might be able to, I don't know if it's appropriate right now, Kate, but just ask her how the mindfulness affected her, because she is now a teacher.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, welcome, Grace. Maybe we can bring Grace a little bit later. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Give her a minute to think about it. We
Yeah.
won't put you right on the spot, but maybe I'd love to hear from you, Grace, and what your experience has been going from being a student of this and now being in the classroom. Oh, wonderful. So you wrote this book. We've mentioned it a few times, Awakening Joy for Kids. How did that come about?
Well, this is so funny. Actually, now I think about it, I wouldn't even tell you this, Kate, I don't think. But I had been sitting and I saw Rick Hansen. Dr. Rick Hansen was going to be in Vancouver, and he was doing something on education with a panel of six other neuroscientists. So I went, and because I live in a small town, I had to get there really early. I have to take a ferry. So I'm sitting at the very front and I'm crocheting, waiting, just waiting for this whole thing to uncover. And this little old man was beside me, and I just crocheted through the entire hours and hours and hours. And he said to me, "What are you doing, my dear?" And I said to him, "Well, I'm making a joy hat." And he said, "What's it for?" And I said, "It's for joy." And I gave it to him. And it felt like this huge opening because I was watching Rick, but I didn't realize it's really hard to talk to these guys, these panelists, right? But I walked up and I said to Rick, somehow I'm going to be doing something with you. I just know it. So I wrote to him and told him about the old man and the joy, because Rick had been talking about how to stimulate joy in your life. And he wrote back to me and I said, "I want your lessons to reach kids. This whole panel is talking about adults and joy. Like, how can we not be talking about translating these lessons to kids?" So I started taking Rick's lessons and doing some lessons in my classroom on resiliency, wiring the brain for joy. And I would tell the kids, you are the scientists. You're actually giving information that's never been tested. You're going to test this and see if it works. So we did that all year. And then I met James through Rick, and James's Awakening Joy was just perfect. So I did write for Rick, and then I went to James and I asked him, "Can I write lessons for your book? I got this." And James was like, "Okay." And he loved them.
And this is James Barras.
James Barras.
Oh, sure.
And we collaborated together, we met together, and I would send him the lessons. And the publisher said yes to the book, and well, I have it, and it's translated now into German as well. But I just found it was so important to create these types of lessons in the classroom. This, to me, was what made me arrive in the classroom and the kids arrive. And some people mentioned it was like a little love bubble down there. It was joy. Yeah.
Sweet. So I know all that's true, that bringing lessons to increase happiness and connection and compassion and mindfulness. This is, of course, I believe in this, and I know that it's really important and really foundational, I think, to learning how to be a well-balanced adult. And so appropriate to bring it into education. And I want to fast forward to this moment of where we are right now. And I could see a lot of people hearing that and feel like, yeah, but joy just seems a million miles away. There's so many issues at hand right now. You know, how is this not just a Band-Aid or something that isn't really a primary concern right now. What would you say to people? Like, how is this relevant right now?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Kate, because when I first heard joy, I'm like, are you kidding me? I have been in classrooms where if I could even get their seats in the chair, it, you know, it could be just so wild. And I have to tell you, it's not like I'm in this bubble room and you're thinking, well, yeah, that's good for you. I have been in difficult classrooms, and I've also been in classrooms where a lot of these things just don't work, just even getting them in the room with so much going on for them. And if they're not used to this kind of process, it takes time. It does. It's not instant.
Mhm.
And what I would say to that is, unless the kids are regulated, unless you begin regulating them, they are not learning. I'm managing behavior
Mhm.
at that point. Maybe a little bit of learning can go on, but if you're having kids that aren't like a majority of the kids not holding the whole group, it can get to be chaos in the classrooms. So I have noticed that it takes time and trust over your teaching career to be able to know that these practices do shift things. Just for instance, I was in 2 days ago, and this little boy I was substituting and helping, he was kind of down. So I did breathing opening practices. I did a little bit of fast body movement and some songs and, just getting the body even moving. And then we did a breath of thinking about someone we love and breathing out to them. And I said to them, anybody want to tell me how this is for them this morning? And he put his hand up and he said, this grade 2, I didn't want to come to school today, and I'm so happy I'm here now.
Mm.
That was 5 minutes in. And I think, especially in the US, is so curriculum driven. We're not as much curriculum driven here, where there's a new curriculum where it's more open lenses, they would call them.
Mhm.
You think, how could I possibly do this when I have to do my math, my spelling, all of these things? How in the world do we stop to do that? But my experience is this will make those other things happen so much easier.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Michele. I I don't know if this is a time to bring in some of, I know you know some people on the call right now. We were talking about it before people enter, just, oh, so and so is here. And I don't know if you want to bring anyone in. I'm curious how the classrooms are right now. I've been hearing from teachers in the Bay Area that just the amount of behavioral issues like you're pointing to, um, a lot of unsettled, dysregulated kids with a lot of emotion coming up. Uh, that seems to be common, but I wonder if someone else wants to speak to what they're noticing in the classroom.
Yeah, I just want to say, just right before that, what you just said about a lot of emotion coming up, what I
Mhm.
find is if we can name those things as a big group and talk about them, the kids relax.
Yeah.
For instance, we had a couple of situations where people either had died or something had happened. And I think I actually have a slide, Heather, on a blackboard. And then I'm going to come back to your thing because this is just coming to me. You'll see a whiteboard, actually, Heather. I sent a photo. And what we did is we just talked about what's difficult, because kids think it's just themselves. Oh my goodness, I got this terrible secret. This is what happened. And what we had here was people who have helped me. Oh yeah, getting through. So in our book, it's not just joy, joy, joy. That there's many chapters on how do you get through hard times when it's really hard. And this is just so beautiful because this was a grade 3 class. And I had no idea the extent of stuff the kids were dealing with and who helped them. And once we got all this out on the board, the kids just relaxed. It's like, oh, they're looking around. Oh, it's not just me. There's so much happening. And then we talked, how do you hold your friends in compassion when these things are happening? how does that work? So these whole classroom teachings, rather than sort of going off to the counselor, I'm not saying that's bad, but I love having a counselor in the school, but this gives greater context for the kids to heal each other.
Right.
So
I know in our mindfulness program, we spend a lot of time on emotion because we're all emotional beings, but and maybe there isn't that huge a difference from um, the emotional experience for a kid than for adult, other than maybe not having the language for it or not knowing, you know, this is human, this is our humanness. Although even adults, I think we sometimes struggle with similar things where we feel like I'm the only one here that's experiencing this or feeling like this, and just how grounding and resourcing it is, like you're saying, just to be able to name it, and then the power of that in the group is so beautiful. This is a great example. I love this outline here. What a simple thing for an educator to do too, if they're finding there's a lot coming up in the class. um, you know, I imagine you could spend a lot of time on this, or it could be something that you could do spontaneously and in a short period of time before you transition into something else.
yeah, and depth or difficult times aren't often talked about as a whole. You know, it's like, oh, the kids are crying. Oh my God, somebody walks in. But once we're past that and we're just relaxed back, it's like, oh, here we go.
Right.
All of this is happening. And then you wonder maybe why some kid has their head down on their desk and you don't know.
Yeah.
So I would love to invite Grace. I texted Grace about the class. If Grace is willing, she said she was. So there she is as a new teacher. And can you see her, Heather?
Great.
And unmute Grace and let's hear from young, vital, in the classroom people.
Let's get you unmuted.
There we go.
Hi, Grace. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. This is a full circle moment. Michele was my teacher in when I was grade 6, and my first part of elementary schooling was in the UK, so it was very academic based, strict, not a whole lot of space for emotions or feelings. So I definitely can recall feeling reluctant maybe to some of Michele's things at first, just being like, what are we doing? Why is there yoga at school? Or why are we outside? Or what are we doing? But now in the role of a teacher, looking back, I'm so grateful. And I don't even think I realized what I had and how lucky I was to have a teacher that valued and understood how important the emotional side was. And that's definitely something that I now try to bring when I'm teaching. I work on call as well. I'm a substitute teacher. And I primarily work at an inner city school here. And so some pretty high needs emotionally. And one of the things I kind of do with the classes that I frequent is we always start the day with a morning meeting. Like, everybody brings a chair in, we sit in a circle, we go around, and we'll use different things. I do the weather a lot. Like, if you were a weather, what's the weather today? What's the weather today in your head? Do we have clouds? Are we feeling foggy? Do we have, are we feeling all rainbows? Are we happy? Is it sunshine, but maybe with some clouds? And so for me, that's like my version of letting kids talk about their emotions without saying, maybe they don't want to say to everybody, I'm feeling sad, but they can say I'm feeling cloudy. That's not embarrassing. Michele's really allowed me the space to prioritize the emotional well-being in kids in classrooms, which, even in university, because it wasn't necessarily at the forefront. It was get through the curriculum, manage the classroom, manage the behaviors separately, instead of being like, this is a community in the classroom and we can all work as a unit together. Yeah.
I love, Grace, how you're talking about this prioritization of emotions and of well-being,
Mhm.
and how I know as educators, you're asked to prioritize a lot of different things that educators maybe now more than ever, but maybe not. Maybe it's been this way for some time, wearing an unbelievable number of hats, and so with each hat comes different priorities, perhaps. And then, of course, the educational piece, being a teacher is at the forefront. But what we're all, I think, pointing to is that bringing in prioritizing this well-being, speaking of emotions, cultivating happiness, teaching kids how to regulate their systems, that then lends to all these other priorities that you all are having to juggle. It gives this foundation for maybe those other expectations to be manageable in some way. And I that might be oversimplifying it because it is so complex to be an educator right now, but I also think it's true. I think it's true that when we have these foundational pieces, um, perhaps instead of having to juggle all of this, there's somewhere to land. There's somewhere to something that can hold all of these pieces, and that's kind of what I hear you saying, Grace, and then certainly Michele, you've been pointing to this.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Something, Michele, you said about like, if we're not, if you're just regulating behavior, they're not learning, which is something that I, in a kind of different ways, the schools that I'm in are often, there's a lot of trust issues of people leaving and coming and going so often. So the biggest thing for me is relationships with the kids. And I read somewhere that it was like, a kid who doesn't like you or does not trust you will not learn from you.
Mm.
And I just think like, I'm not trying to become this child's best friend, but just making sure that they can hear my voice and they're listening to it because they trust me and they know I'm going to come back next week if their teacher's not here. It's been really putting that on the forefront and knowing that, we'll also be able to get math done. But yeah, that's been a big thing for me when I go into classrooms, is creating a positive relationship.
Yeah, I love that, Grace. And I was thinking too, which we haven't said, is for the teacher to be regulated before you even meet your kids, because you're flying around at 300 miles an hour. And if you're a teacher on call, you could be called 20 minutes before or less, and you don't know what you're walking into. So it's so important to regulate yourself. You're doing your own breathing or whatever your practice is, a short walk, setting intention before you walk into that room. And in the book, I talk about creating a container. And the container is from the second those kids just are at the door, how do they know you're there? And do you greet each one? Like, I always wait right at the front door and I greet each child and in some way do a little connection that they know I see them and that they see me. And that automatically creates relationship just as they're walking in. And same with the parents, get them on your side, know we're a team. So I love that, Grace. And I love that I can only imagine, because you were a bit of a rascal, how you can now, because I was too, how you can now know those kids and pull them in. I think it's such a great thing to have, because I often was in the office and I think now, if I was doing some of these practices, it would have been helpful for me as a student.
Yeah, I see the rascal kids and I
love those rascals. Yeah, I love the rascals. Bring them in. They always send them to me.
Well, thank you, Grace. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And it was very full circle.
Yeah.
And Michele, I wanna come back to the book, and I think what you and Grace are sharing, it leads into my next question about these lenses that you talk about, that there's, and this is something I think we're going to get to practice. We're going to get those who are on the call and those who are listening to the recording later. Um, Tell me, why don't you share with us, what are the lenses?
So these aren't the curriculum lenses I just alluded to a second
Right.
ago. These
Right.
are,
This is something you personally have
yeah. So
developed.
these are mindfulness lenses. And what I, basically, if in our book, I would look through, and these are lenses that are in all aspects of mindfulness teaching. They're not just awakening joy lenses, but I'm thinking about lenses like gratitude, integrity, loving ourselves, compassion. So there's 10 lenses in our book. And then what I did in the book is I wrote through those lenses. I gave practices to go with those lenses. So for instance, people would say, well, you have to teach math. You have to teach this type of math. So I would take a lens, say, giving to others. This was one that the kids love this. I worked on this for at least a week, maybe longer. So the lens was, well, there's many lenses in this, but one was giving to others. So one of the little girls in the class had family friends that were starting a school in Guatemala, and they had nothing. And this school has taken off. It's amazing what Project Somos, what they've done. So this was their very, very beginning. So I said to the kids, when pennies were valuable, do you remember that? Bring the pennies
I'm
in.
sure that was in my lifetime.
Well, it's not that long ago. We don't use pennies anymore.
No,
So
not really.
we all brought in the pennies, and through math, we weighed them, we added them. What I did is every time we got to $10 of pennies, we traced the body of a child and put it up in the hallway. And that was the start of how much money we could possibly raise. So these outlines of kids, the hands were joined, and it went down the hall. I think there was like 10 bodies. So say over $100 of pennies, and they visually could see how much money they were collecting. Then we strung the pennies in years.
Oh, wow.
So we could see what year isn't represented. So they were digging in this money, trying to find a certain year, taping them all up. We found pennies from early 1900s. Those were the valuable pennies. And then we looked in, what are pennies made of? Why are they out of circ? And they had like their little calculators adding and bringing all the money in. And then we phoned up these people and said, would you like to come? We have a donation. And we had them close their eyes, and they got this donation of a huge bag of money to take, to change into money for Project Somos. And we kept in connection with these people and saw what their money went to, and how the kids hadn't arrived yet at this school. So it was the building blocks of this school. So then we get into pen pals, then we get into writing through these lenses of whatever we were doing. And I just want to say, at another school, I love working with schools. It was in Africa. The kids would write back to my students. So they had letters from a pen pal in a small Ugandan school and would talk about how they like to play soccer. And we sent them little braided bracelets we made. And the kids had pictures of these little bracelets on their arms, so that they were just kids connecting with someone else in the world. And so that was just like, you can take your lens of your math lens, put gratitude in there, get your writing in there, from me to we is in there, so any lesson that I quote had to teach, I just threw in how we can change it. You're still doing the curriculum by changing the delivery of what we were doing.
So the curriculum is the curriculum, but you're saying we can bring in these practices just by how we bring in a lens of how do we want to approach the curriculum. And then I just can imagine, the amount of creativity and aliveness that comes into the curriculum because of that. I mean, what you just described, I can imagine being a kid. I can imagine being an adult in that room and being completely engaged in what this was all about, and how its pennies at that time were relevant in the world, not just, something that we're counting in math. So that creativity, that engagement comes along with these lenses, which then are also cultivating these incredible human skills for these kids, right?
And the kids are excited. They are so pumped to come to school and do social justice. Like we did so many social justice, and still, if I can, I will do. That's where I work everything through, is the social justice lenses, you know, and then we want to be there, and they know they make change. That's what I wanted kids leaving with. I'm a change agent. I did this. We would have toy sales of their old toys and figure out where they had to put a proposal together and say, if they got that much money, where do they want to touch something in the world? And they had to do something local and something global. So then we'd go to the food bank. And one time I got them to go to the grocery store with their money. They all had carts, and they bought the food for the food bank, and they took the food to the food bank and sorted it and helped packages up for people. So like they're in it. They are the change agents. And
What grade was that, Michele? Do you
those
remember?
I think were maybe 6s, because they had to add up how much all their groceries were with the money that they had raised. And then we all walked out with these carts full of groceries, and were able to take it to the food bank. We have 2 food banks on the coast.
Oh, impactful.
Yeah.
Well, I know you want us to try
Yeah.
these lenses on, and so I'm wondering, so we're not about to teach, in the Zoom call right now. We're not going to be teaching curriculum to kids. How do you want to set this up? How can we use these
Funny. Yeah. So this, what I'll say is, this was a little bit of a crazy one that just came to me. So I'm going to try and throw it out to you guys and see what happens.
Great.
And I did try it. I was in the class the other day. So, and I sent Heather some pictures, which she's going to send out later to you, of how this worked out. And I guess what I want you to understand is, it can be so easy. You don't have to come up with some big deal. So what I got called into grade 2, emergency, you got to go. Grade 2, the teacher had an illness, and she didn't have something ready. So I was like, okay. So I had been crocheting. So I had all this wool on my by my bed. And I had this little card my girlfriend had given to me as a thank you card with little tiny birds on it. And I thought, how can I do a lesson on mindful seeing? How to see the world. So